The period from about 1450 to 1600 is often referred to as the Age of Exploration. Corresponding roughly with the Renaissance in Europe, this period is notable for such important achievements as the discovery of the unknown continents of North and South America, the establishment of a sea route around the southern tip of Africa to India, and the circumnavigation of the globe. World history reached an important turning point during this period, and it is accurate to say that modern history began at this time. Let us begin with a general examination of the discoveries made during these fascinating 150 years. This is a map of the great explorations. Doubtless, the most important was Columbus's voyage from Spain to the West Indies, which served as the inspiration for the other voyages. Shortly after came da Gama's expedition from Portugal, down around the African continent to India and back. English exploration of the New World began with Cabot's voyage to Canada in search of a northwest passage to the east. And one of the most astonishing journeys was Magellan's, whose ship sailed from Spain westward all the way around the Earth's circumference. Of course, these expeditions were not organized overnight. Let us pause for a brief view of some of the forces which led to the great exploratory effort of the 15th and 16th centuries. First of all, Marco Polo's reports of his travels aroused interest in exploration. Marco Polo was born in Venice in 1254. In 1271, he set out with his father and his uncle on a voyage to Cathay or China. After years of slow land travel across vast deserts and great rivers, he reached the court of Kublai Khan, the Emperor of China. He remained in China for 20 years and became the Emperor's favorite advisor. He returned to Venice in 1295, bringing back stories of the immense wealth of the East. His experiences were written down in a book which became a 14th century bestseller. Europeans were taken over by the Eastern fever, and many wished to duplicate Polo's voyage. Besides interest in foreign travel, the desire for wealth, trade, and land encouraged men to explore. At this time, the only practical means of obtaining Eastern goods was to purchase them in Asia Minor, where they had been transported overland from India and China. But this was a slow method of cargo transport, and since water travel was safer and much more rapid than land travel, European navigators began to study their maps to see if some water route to India and China could be found. Prince Henry of Portugal founded a school for navigators. Here, maps, navigation instruments, and sailing methods were studied with care. In the second half of the 15th century, Prince Henry began sending out small expeditions, mainly to the western coast of Africa, to collect information. However, with crude navigation instruments, it took brave men to sail the sea. It was difficult to recruit sailors for expeditions into uncharted territories. Many people believed that the earth was flat, and that ships which sailed too far from known waters would fall off the edge of the world. Such fears had prevented extensive explorations, and the Europeans' notion of the size of the world was quite limited. This was the world as sailors knew it before Columbus discovered America. Only 3 continents were known: Europe, Africa, and Asia. Before Columbus's voyage, it never occurred to anyone that other continents might exist besides these 3. The idea did not even occur to Columbus, and although he did believe the world was round, he thought that there was nothing but water between the western coast of Europe and the eastern coast of Asia. He decided that the quickest way to reach Asia was to sail westward across the Atlantic until he reached China and India. Columbus convinced the Spanish court he could find a sea route to the Indies. The Spanish rulers, Ferdinand and Isabella, deliberated for a long time before undertaking the expense of equipping several ships for a voyage which might turn out to be useless. However, the possibility that Columbus might succeed tempted them. A quick water route to India and China would make Spain the wealthiest country in the world. Finally, the 2 rulers agreed to sponsor Columbus's voyage. Thus, in 3 tiny ships, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, Columbus sailed westward. The weather was clear and the sailing calm. But as days passed, Columbus's sailors became uneasy. No land was sighted, and the superstitious fears of the sailors began to make them wish to turn back. At one point, they threatened to mutiny unless Columbus ordered the ships back to Spain. He promised that if land was not sighted in 3 days, he would give up his project. The sailors reluctantly agreed, but luckily, land was sighted on the 3rd day. When he landed on America's coast, Columbus believed he had reached the Indies. Actually, the island he reached was probably Watling Island in the Bahamas. The natives, whom Columbus referred to as Indians, knew nothing of India or China. Columbus decided that this island was not actually part of the Indies, but that by sailing a little further westward, he would reach Japan or China. He returned to Spain to organize another expedition. This time he had no difficulty in obtaining sponsorship. And yet, neither his second nor his third voyage brought back gold, spices, or any reports of the Eastern Empire. Gradually it became obvious that not Asia, but a new continent had been discovered. This was an important enough fact in itself, but Europeans had not given up the idea of finding some water route to India. An alternate solution was advanced by the Portuguese explorers. Diaz of Portugal discovered the Cape of Good Hope and opened the true way to the Indies. Portuguese sailors had been gradually moving further and further south along the coast of Africa, hoping to find its southern tip. But it was not until 1488 that Diaz reached the extreme southern tip of Africa. He knew then that a water route to India was possible around Africa, but he lacked sufficient supplies to continue the journey. Instead, he returned to Portugal, but with the news that it was possible to sail around Africa. Other countries in Europe were still hoping to find a western water route to India. It was hoped that a northwest passage above the North American continent could be discovered, which would give the discoverers claim to the land. England was foremost in sponsoring explorations for the discovery of a northwest passage. The explorations of Cabot in 1499 gave England a claim to all North America. Cabot was an Italian from Genoa who made 2 voyages to the New World for England in an effort to locate a northwest passage to the Indies. He did not locate the northwest passage, but he did explore Labrador, Newfoundland, and the Gulf of St. Lawrence, all of which he claimed for England. Meanwhile, explorations to the South American continent continued. Amerigo Vespucci, for whom America was named, made 4 trips to South America. A Florentine by birth, Vespucci went along as an observer of various Spanish expeditions along the western coast of South America. During these expeditions, the River Plata and the area then known as Patagonia were discovered. Vespucci wrote letters to friends in Europe in which he vividly described these and other discoveries. These letters were copied and dispersed throughout Europe to satisfy the Europeans' insatiable curiosity about the New World. Mapmakers who were drawing up new maps of South America began referring to this territory as America, after the observer who had written about it. In this way, the whole New World gradually came to be known as North, South, and Central America. The central base for Spanish explorations continued to be the West Indies. But in the early 16th century, Spanish expeditions began to move into the southern part of the present-day United States. Ponce de Leon, in search of gold for Spain, discovered Florida. It was he who gave this state its name. Impressed by the beautiful tropical flowers he saw there, Ponce de Leon called the new territory Florida, which means land of flowers. He had hoped to find gold as well as the legendary Fountain of Youth, but he was disappointed in both projects. He did, however, establish a fort at the site of the present-day city of St. Augustine, which was used as a base for subsequent Spanish explorations of the southeastern United States. On the other side of the globe, Portugal's efforts to reach the east by water were finally crowned with success. Vasco da Gama discovered the sea route around the continent of Africa to India. In a voyage begun in 1498, da Gama sailed around the Cape of Good Hope, up the eastern coast of Africa, and into the Indian Ocean. He reached India, where he purchased a shipload of spices before turning back to Portugal. The round trip required a year, but it was the fastest method of reaching India which had been discovered at that time. Soon Portugal had established markets in many Asian ports, began building a large colonial empire. Spain, however, continued to concentrate its efforts on finding a westerly water route to Asia. In 1513, Balboa discovered the Pacific Ocean and claimed it for Spain. He called it the South Sea, and his claim stated that every shore washed by this ocean belonged to Spain. The discovery of the Pacific proved conclusively that America was not the continent of Asia. There remained the task of crossing another ocean before Asia could be reached by sailing west. Soon an explorer appeared who had resolved to undertake just that project. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan made the first voyage around the world. He proved the world was round. Setting out with 3 ships, he sailed down the western coast of South America until he reached Cape Horn. He moved through the straits which today bear his name into the Pacific Ocean. Then followed an agonizing voyage across the world's largest body of water until Magellan's ships reached the Philippine Islands. Here Magellan was killed during a battle with the natives. But the last remaining ship, the Victoria, sailed successfully on to India, down around Africa, and from there back to Portugal. The Victoria returned with only 18 survivors, but these men had the distinction of being the first men to have traveled all the way around the globe. This voyage showed that a western sailing route to Asia was too long, too difficult, and impractical. However, Spain did not give up. She was soon to lose interest in Asian trade because of new developments in her South American colonies. Cortez, Spanish conqueror of Mexico, was the first to bring gold from the New World. He conquered the Aztec Indian Empire in 1520 and extracted enormous quantities of gold from the defeated Indians. A similar military expedition led by the Spaniard Pizarro resulted in the downfall of the Inca Empire in Peru, whose gold mines were even wealthier than those of Mexico. Soon, regular convoys of Spanish galleons crossed the Atlantic, bringing untold wealth from the New World to Spain. And although it entered the contest for colonies late, France played a significant part in the exploration of America along with Spain and Portugal. Cartier discovered the St. Lawrence River and Quebec. He called the land New France. His first voyage was made in 1534 under the sponsorship of King Francis I, who hoped a northwest passage to the east could be found. 2 subsequent voyages proved futile in locating the northwest passage, but by that time France was also interested in colonizing these new territories and establishing trading posts for furs and other goods. The establishment of these French colonies is the explanation for the fact that French is still spoken in many areas of Canada today. De Soto, Spanish soldier and explorer, reached the Mississippi in 1541. This discovery was the climax of a long expedition which had begun in Florida and had worked its way westward toward the Great River. De Soto had hoped to find gold, but he was disappointed the Indians had none to offer him. On the other hand, De Soto's explorations brought back a great deal of valuable information for geographers who were trying to gain a clearer view of the size and configuration of territories in the New World. This and other new information began appearing on the maps which were published at that time. Mercator's new kind of map helped people to understand the many explorations of this age. Mapmakers have always been faced with the problem of how a spherical globe map can be projected on a flat surface map without distortion. Mercator's projection, which you see on the wall behind him, used a rectangular grid for the longitudes and latitudes of the globe, so that the relative locations of the different continents could be clearly understood. Before we conclude our survey of the age of exploration, there's one final explorer who deserves our attention. Henry Hudson discovered the Hudson River and made inland settlement possible in the New World. From 1607 to 1611, Hudson made 3 voyages to the North American continent trying to find a northwest passage, first for the Dutch East India Company and then for England. The result of his explorations was the establishment of Dutch and English colonies in the present-day United States and Canada. Let us pause for a moment to see how much you have understood and what you can remember from all that you have just seen and heard. I shall read 5 contributions made by the explorers. One of them is incorrect. See if you can spot it. Here are the choices. 1. Columbus reaches the continent of Asia by sailing west. 2. A sea route to India is found. 3. America gets a name. 4. Magellan proves the world is round. 5. The New World is explored. Did you notice the incorrect statement? Let's see if you were right. Contributions of great explorers. 1. Columbus discovers a new continent. 2. A sea route to India is found. 3. America gets a name. 4. Magellan proves the world is round. 5. The New World is explored. You now see that the first statement in the list I read to you before was incorrect. Columbus did not reach the continent of Asia by sailing west. Instead, he made a much more important discovery. He found a new continent which was to assume a greater and greater importance in world history. Indeed, our own country was founded as a direct result of the achievements of the age of exploration.